Hi, so I'm Ben Crick. I'm the Artistic Director of Skipton Building Society Camerata, and we're doing a concert, a real one, in a room with people and an audience and everything. And this is incredibly exciting. And we're being joined for this by Linton Stephens, the bassoonist, who Linton, I've known Linton for about 16 years, and he was one of the original members of Skipton Building Society Camerata way back in the early 2000s. So we caught up on Zoom earlier today, had a chat about where Skipton fits in the industry, the bassoon concerto that Linton will be playing at the end of this month's diversity and equality and how that's affecting the sector at the minute. It's just a chat about where we are coming out of COVID. So have a listen, and I hope it's something you found interesting. Cheers.
Do you know what? It's not just that though, is it, Ben? It's not just providing culture in a place like Skipton, which has a lot of culture actually, I think. And I say this in the nicest possible way. Surprisingly, for a small place, it has a fair amount going on. But it's also creating quite, over the years, like that was a staple for me doing Skipton when I was up in Manchester.
I hope so. I hope there's quite a lot of players out there that have gone on like you to do some really big national, international stuff.
It was like I cut my teeth in Skipton with the likes of likes of Marianne and Manon, good players.
Ant Thompson, people like that.
Yeah.
People who've done stuff and still come back. What's great is these people, when they're free, still come back and play national level music in a little market town at top of the Yorkshire Dales. And there's something really special about that. That the longer we can keep it going, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. We just need to find a big fund. There were no. It was literally as soon as I picked up a bassoon, it was like there were no bassoons where I lived, so they were just like, right, get you here. Monday night you're gonna be here, then you're gonna go here on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Like literally for the last year, and then I was in the junior school. So for the last year of school, I was literally doing everything.
I mean, you must have been. And so you, and who was the driving force? Because usually it's somebody's parent because they're young.
Oh, it's
about this time to make your own decisions.
Well, that's the thing. When I told my mum I wanted to play the bassoon, she was like, "You dare bring a bloody bassoon in this house for a year, clarinet." I'd played the oboe for about a year when I was 8, and then quit.
Right.
But when I was that age, I wanted to play the bassoon.
Why? Why and how?
I just saw a picture of it in a book, and I thought that looks like a chimney, and I want to play it. So
brilliant.
But when I asked the teacher, she was like, "You're too small." So I cut my nose off to spite my face and quit the oboe as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got a good decision. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't do
And then the opportunity came around when I was like, I was about 16 and a half, nearly 17. I'd been playing the clarinet for a bit because I wanted to do music GCSE. And a girl who was at the grammar school opposite me was like, "Oh, guess what?" She was a good friend of mine. She was like, "Oh, guess what? The music teacher came in today and asked everybody if they wanted to play the bassoon, and nobody said yes." And it happened to be my old oboe teacher, so I knew who it was. And I said, "Well, if nobody's going to do it, I'll do it." So I gave her a letter to take to her. And then I used to trundle along to the grammar school on I think it was a Tuesday night after school for my lessons for a bit. And
then you weren't even at that school?
No, I wasn't. No, but then after but I knew the teacher. She was my teacher when I was little. And then after about 5 months, she was like, because she was an oboist, she was like, "I can't teach you anymore." So she packed me off to junior school.
That's amazing. That is amazing because you are. Did you feel that you were starting 10 years after everyone else?
It was nice. I never felt like there was a rivalry.
Good. So you come out of college, and so even in your third year, we're doing stuff in Skipton like The Soldier's Tale. Do you remember we did that gig in Grimsby?
Yeah, I do remember
we did it for ages, and your lips started bleeding because rehearsals went on that long. I remember that. It's natural progression for you, isn't it? Then you come out of college, freelance orchestras like Skipton, and you're in that, and you're working with the people you knew from college in some cases, aren't you?
Well, that was the nice thing about Skipton for me was I was working with people who were older than me. So when I joined Skipton, I think I was the youngest for a good couple of years actually.
Must have been.
And then that tide changed, and then I was devastated. But
yeah. So I've done gigs now where I'm the oldest. It's depressing.
That's the yeah. I haven't got to that point yet, but I think that's going to
Coming.
be pretty.
Yeah,
But I was playing with the likes of like Marianne, who was out there, already doing it,
yeah,
and not only was that like a massive reassurance for me, um, to have their stamp of approval to play with the
yeah,
likes of them, but also, you learn a lot doing that, don't you? You don't
yeah,
get you like I said, you cut your teeth doing that,
yeah.
doing these gigs. And I don't want to. I say you pay your dues, and I don't want to say that with any disrespect for the format, but
Yeah.
that those first opportunities are really important for
Yeah.
a player. And the thing is, some players do come out and walk straight into the big symphonies and stuff like that. But I still needed time to develop, and Skipton afforded me that opportunity, I think.
Good. No, but I think that's what we should do. I think this is exactly what we did. To be honest, we did it more than we do now, because now it's people like you and Marianne still coming. So we don't. But I think because I was that age as well, I was in my early 20s, and we all did it together, and we all learned together, and it was nice. And now we're in a stage where we all go and do various other things, and then we come back and do Skipton, and it does feel like sort of like homecoming every time we do them. I'm really excited about you coming back to this concerto. Brilliant.
Well, I was so chuffed that you asked me, Ben.
It's gonna be brilliant.
It's like there's no way I would have said no. It's nice to come back. It's nice to come back to where you I wouldn't say perfected my art, because I'm certainly not there by any means. But where you develop a lot of skills, and not just that as well, like the friendships that you form there as well. Like, it sounds so cheesy, but it is, like you say, you get back and it's
all the same players. You're going to come back and there'll be Louise playing violin and Doug on cello. These people are all there. Is that your dog?
Say hello, yeah.
Of course, have a look. Come on, let's have a look. It's the first time I've seen him not on Instagram.
He's a moving teenager at the moment, one of the busiest times for me, because I do quite a lot with the Musicians Union as well.
You do? Yeah.
I chair their equalities committee, so I'm just stroking the dog, by the way. That's why I'm kind of
knock yourself out. No, enjoy it. I'm happy with that.
So I've got my chair in the equalities committee, so that's busy. In the wake of people returning to Corona, there's lots of additional considerations on top of all the stuff that we already do. So that keeps me fairly busy. And then,
are we making progress? Is it getting better?
Do you know what? So I've been doing quite a lot of consulting, specifically actually with the BBC orchestras.
Right.
And the fact is, I've always felt in the past, and I've always been critical in the past, that there's been a lot of talk and no action.
Yeah.
And I think in the wake of the George Floyd Black Lives Matter movement last year, I think it's propelled people into action. So people are having and scheduling and making time to have these conversations and think practically about it, and actually try to make some differences to it's for me, it's access as a general thing, access not just for Black and brown people in orchestras, for who we see it's far too few, but also in the makeup of management and admin teams, but also in terms of equality for women. It was hugely eye-opening for me to hear some of the stories of what women go through in classical music. Especially a real shock for me was for people with disabilities, and there's still difficulties for people from the LGBTQ plus community, as well as other. Yeah, completely.
It's not an oddity in music.
Oh, it's 10 a penny, but there's still things that we need to tackle. For example,
That's a challenge, isn't it? There's a big interest about it at the minute, and there has been for the last 18 months. But is that now going to see a real change? And does it start? I just think it needs to start as young as possible. Primary school accent, that it has to be so young. Because you just said that you started at 16, 17, which great. but there's a lot of people out there that started at 3, that started at, from violinists, cello players particularly, that started pre-primary school. And if you start 10 years after those people, you've got 10 years of catch up, which you proved you can do, but it's hard work.
But it's not just even catching up musically, it's catching up with the culture. It's understanding, like, there's so much weird stuff. Like, so I present the podcast for BBC Classical Fix. What we do is we stick together a playlist of 6 pieces for people who don't usually engage with classical music.
Right.
And what's really interesting is everybody has got something to say really interesting about classical music, but the one thing that comes back again and again that these people say is I was just nervous because I didn't want to say the wrong thing. And I'm like, but at the end of the day, it's music and it's art, and everybody's opinion is valid about anything. You know, you don't have to. And they find kind of attending classical music concerts is you know, a bit of an occasion, and this, that, and the other, and it's all fancy. And that's fine. I think that's great, and I think it can be, and I think it's allowed to be. But I think we just have to be careful if that is an exclusive format, and how can we make it more inclusive? Like,
really interesting that they're not saying the wrong thing idea. Because to be honest, in years, that's what stopped me talking about equality and diversity. Because like left wing liberal, I'm like on board with this, but terrified that you're going to say the wrong thing and you're going to horribly put your foot in it. So what this last 18 months allowed us to do is that conversation much more in the open. So it's much easier to engage with. But
as well, you know, the fear of saying the wrong thing. I can't tell you how many times I've said the wrong thing. So many times. But I think as well, we've just got to be kind of humble enough to be corrected. And it can be difficult to digress ever so slightly.
Which is what you're going to be doing in the Vivaldi, turning up and doing your best.
Indeed. Right. Well, hopefully,
That first bar, is it as virtuosic as it sounds? So the orchestra play, and then the bassoon comes in with this.
So the thing about the Vivaldi is, it's so Vivaldi wrote something like, well, one of his biggest outputs was his concertos, and I think he wrote 230 for the violin, and then the instrument he wrote the next most for was the bassoon. He wrote 39 for the bassoon, and I think 2 of them are unfinished. So he had an incredible affinity for the instrument, and he writes every single one of those concertos is so well written for the instrument. And it's interesting because it was a brand new instrument at the time. It was it was kind of just taking over the Dulcian, which was dying out around Europe, but it wasn't really very popular where he was in. I think he was in Venice. It kind of rose to fame in France, and the instrument that he wrote for was a very basic version of the bassoon. I think it had like maybe 4 or 5 keys on it, and in comparison now the modern bassoon, well, for the 2 thumbs alone, has something like 12 keys. So and that's not even counting the ones for the fingers, the digits on the front. So he was writing for a very basic, very primitive early version of the bassoon, and yet he's written all of these incredibly virtuosic lines. So it's hard enough to do on the bassoon, but to think that he was doing it, he was writing for an instrument that was even more basic than what we've got now is pretty impressive.
So, do we know who was playing it? He wrote for people, so he must have known some great.
I think that some of them are dedicated to a particular player, but we don't have a lot of information around that player. But we do know as well that he was teaching at a girls' school at the time.
Right, is that period?
And I wonder if he'd had. There's no record of a bassoon teacher being at that school, but I wonder if he'd had an exceptional pupil or 2 there that was really talented at the bassoon. And I think the other thing as well is that he wrote them all within about a 10-year. We think he wrote them all within about a 10-year period, between something like 1727 to 1738, something like that, very approximate. But they sit so nicely on the instrument. They sit, so they are extremely virtuosic. But even today, even 300 years after they were written, they lend themselves very nicely to the instrument and to the tone as well. So to look at that part,
Yeah, that opening bit where the word solo. Yeah,
it could very easily be a string part, and yet it
it's
sits
good.
so nicely on the bassoon, and the tone of the bassoon lends itself perfectly to this. I think the reason these concertos have survived and are now like such an important part of the bassoon repertoire is because it's so well written. Even 300 years later, these are some of the best concertos written for the instrument.
Yeah, that's good.
And they remain.
It's my first ever bassoon concerto I've been involved with. Brilliant. It's really exciting. It's great.
It's good. It's a good one to do, I think. And this one is probably the most popular one. I think it's really obvious why. It's a great one to play.
Yeah.
It exploits because the bassoon, I don't possibly then probably hadn't developed this reputation for being the clown of the orchestra.
It's got that a bit, hasn't it? There's a bit of that.
It definitely. But
yeah.
He uses it in such a great way here. And especially in that middle movement as well, where you just hear how serious and expressive
it's so lyrical. It's so incredibly lyrical.
And these incredibly long lines, and this kind of interplay between how the orchestra, the orchestra will play something, and then the bassoon will come back. It's incredibly clever writing, and it's just a nice piece to listen to as well. It's just really, for me, orally satisfying.
Yeah, and that's what as we said, at the end of the day, that's what music should be. It should be
exactly.
Good to listen.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's nice is we can do repertoire that's slightly off the beaten track. It's straight back. So we've got this Marianna Martinez piece, a woman from the 18th century.
Do you know what? She's fantastic, isn't she?
It's really good.
Do you know, it's because she died pretty young, didn't she? So her output wasn't massive, but she was a contemporary of Mozart's, wasn't she? And I think
musically it sounds a little older, but yeah, it's a contemporary of Mozart.
And yeah, I think she was doing it. I mean, I've only listened to a few of her pieces, but her orchestral stuff is incredibly exciting for the time. And I think it's
the best of this sort of style, this Rococo, so this end of the Baroque, just crossing into classicism. It's as good as a lot of the stuff that's out there from that. It's the same in it. She's not in the canon, so she don't get played.
But this is exactly what I mean. There's if it's people talk about it, we just the things I've heard so many times is we want to play good music, and I'm like, well, Marianna Martinez has existed for 3 years and has written some incredible music, so why haven't we included her in the canon?
In the canon, I know. I'd love to know how you get in. And the thing about the canon, there is some works in it that are sublime. Mozart's Jupiter Symphony.
Oh yeah,
but there's a lot that isn't. There's a lot that's fine. And the Bologna, the Joseph Bologna that we're doing in the same concert as well, doesn't get played, and that deserves an outing.
Well, I always ask when I do my sessions with the orchestra. I always ask these unanswerable questions so that they spark debate. And one of them I always ask is, does the audience tell the orchestra what they should be playing, or does the orchestra tell the audience what they should be listening to? Because so often it's like, well, we know we'll get an audience for Tchaik 5, and we know we'll get an audience for Beethoven 9. But I'm like, but at some point, somebody has to make that decision that it's going to be repeated in perpetuity,
I think the correct answer is there has to be a bit of both. There has to be a bit of both. Because in this day and age, there's some concerts you need to sell all your tickets.
Yeah.
To make ends meet. And yeah, I'm sure if you're BBC Phil and you stick on Beethoven 9, I'm sure you'll sell out. I'm sure a lot of people will have listened to Beethoven. I mean, there's no wrong with Beethoven 9. It's great. But then other concerts, smaller venues, slightly reduced orchestras, gives you the financial freedom to try stuff that might not sell out. But I also think there's a committed classical music audience out there who've heard 25 Beethoven 9s and are ready they look forward to the opportunity to hear.
Yeah, also, Ben, I think there's a non-committed classical music audience who are just waiting to be shown something new. There's a whole generation now who of people because we have access to anything we want at our fingertips, with a mobile phone or an iPad. So I think people can hear the Beethoven lines whenever they want, but there's people who want to come for the experience of being at a live event. And I think there's a large number of people who are coming without prejudice to listen to whatever classical music is offered. And I think now is the time to be a bit more daring and open doors for people and do just that. Give them the opportunity to hear new stuff.
I mean, yeah, this Skipton concert, to be honest, it proves your point in a way, because it sold out 3 weeks before the gig. There's an 18th century woman composer in there. There's an 18th century black composer in there, neither of which really get an outing. And then there is a bit of Mozart in there as well. So
you've got a horn and a bassoon who, never get the spotlight either. So
nobody goes to them. So, yeah. So there is this, yeah. I think a bit of what you know and a bit of something new. That's a night out, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you go in a rock band, you want to hear their greatest hits.
The stuff you like and all the new stuff that they haven't done yet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens. Every other walk of music does that. That's what they do. It's only us that give you Chag 5 again. Yeah, that's right, dog, innit? That's what you reckon.
Yeah, it's like Chag 5, not having any.
Heard it. Yeah. Well, it's a winner. It's a winner.